Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we connect the wisdom and experience of ministry leaders to the realities of ministry in the trenches. We journey with ministry leaders through all the hidden aspects that help us to become fruitful ministers. Here at the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, we discuss the stuff that no one told you about Catholic ministry and strive to help ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. Our hosts are Christy Cabanis, the Director for Missionary Discipleship for the Diocese of Cleveland, and Sarah Jarzembowski, the Director for Marriage and Family Life at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Crofton, Maryland. Please show your support for our efforts by clicking like and subscribe and commenting below. And now here are Sarah and Christy. Part of the conversation that we have. Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Miss Julianne Stanz. I feel like we've been friends forever, Julianne, and you're like friends
Absolutely.
with everybody. You call everybody my friend, so I love that. My friend Julianne is the Director for Evangelization and Discipleship with the Diocese of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And you still a consultant with the USCCB? I feel like I see you out here a lot of times when the bishops are out here. So that's a nodding yes there. So, and you're with the Secretariat for Catechesis, right?
Yep, I'm with Evangelization Catechesis, the subcommittee on the catechism, and the national team for the Eucharistic Revival.
Oh, that's awesome.
All the things. Yeah.
All the things. That's wonderful. Well, welcome to our podcast today. We're really excited to have you here. And we got talking about Christy and I got talking about, what do we wish we knew when we kind of started in ministry, and that's kind of the gist of what we talk about. And your name kind of came up because you keep coming back with, when you talk about evangelization, you tend to like go back to your roots, and your roots are very Irish. You're from Ireland. You've got this beautiful Irish accent. I'm wearing my Irish green and my Celtic.
I saw that.
So my Celtic knots here for my friends. But you tend to go back to your Irish roots with all of that. So tell us a little bit about your rootedness in your Irish faith, and what you brought along with you on some of your journey there.
It's great to be here with you. I just love the morning energy. And for everyone that's listening in or watching, welcome. I grew up in Ireland, and I received a great education in Ireland. I grew up in a really small little town in the mountains. It was super picturesque, and had a huge family around me, just huge family of leaders and women and strong men, and just really helped me understand that I could dream and believe and work hard, and life would be good, but hard work was necessary. And so I went to college in Ireland, and then about 2001 I came over here to kind of took a career break. I was working on some doctoral research, and the rest is history. I never went back. Fell in love with America, and found a husband here. And I always say to people, Ireland will always be my homeland. It's part of who I am. It's part of just the DNA, how I raise my children, practices, all of that. But America is where I fell in love, and so it's like my heartland. It's where all the good things in life have been for me. So I go back home quite a bit, but I'm here in Wisconsin, which is one of the coldest places on the earth, I'm convinced, in January.
Definitely is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Very far north.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of ways do you think, Julianne, like that background in Ireland, the dreaming and the hard work are some things, but what else did your experiences give you? Well, you know what? Let's just back that up entirely. Let's say, how did you start in ministry? How did that happen? Can you tell that story?
Yeah, I think like most people, we wander into ministry kind of unconsciously in a lot of respects. Like I've never met anyone who was a child who said, I'm going to be a DRE, yay! Or my dream is to work at the diocesan offices. Like I've never in all the years met someone whose like life trajectory was ministry, which is kind of sad, actually. It's a sad reflection that we don't help our young people have an awareness or an understanding that this is, hugely important work that they're doing, that it can be tremendously fulfilling and it is incredibly meaningful. For me, I wanted to be a teacher. And so went off to college, graduated, was teaching, and then had this awareness that I probably needed to take a break from that and travel, see a little bit of the world. And so I came over to the US in that career break time. And I was teaching at a school, a Catholic school. And then, this is the classic, you do all the things when you're in ministry. And, the pastor came and said, "You're young." And I was at the time. And he said, "We need a youth group, a youth minister." And I was like, "Okay, I think I can do that." And then it was, "And our RCIA director is retired, and can you do that?" And it went on and on and on. And I found myself doing faith formation and teaching in a very, very small rural parish. I think what really helped me is, our town in Ireland is very simple. It's very rural, but it's very rooted in certain values: strong family, faith, community. Being persistent and resilient is expected. And because, you grew up in a large family or in a larger community where everybody knows everybody, you're always flexible and you're creative. And I think flexibility and adaptability are two of the hallmarks of good leadership in ministry. And because I think we can get stuck in our ways so many times. And you run into this. I know Sarah and Christy, we've talked about this even in our pre-conversation. You can run into these brick walls of like, we have always done it this way. And it might not be stated that way. It's often these unconscious cultural norms in the parish office or the diocese or in leadership that you're not aware of until you run in and you go, "I'm facing resistance. What's that look like?" So those are some of the pieces that I think have really helped me grow as a leader.
Yeah. Awesome. I think I agree with that. And the we've always done it this way. I always, whenever I see it, it comes out usually it feels like it's disrespectful to whomever handed this to me, you know what I mean? So if, Sister Mary Joseph handed me this program in this way, then I'm somehow dishonoring her if I don't continue to do it that way. And I think the other is that ministry can be so hectic and hairy and very busy. Like you say, like the pastor's coming to you and saying, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" Then there's a part of you that's like, I can't think outside the box because I just need to get these things accomplished. So you find yourself doing just the programmatic aspects of it. So could you tell us a little bit, like, what do you think the difference is between running a program or being in ministry? Is there a difference in that, or could you articulate that?
Yeah, I think, I was reflecting on the questions that you had said, and just to help me frame kind of my own thinking on leadership a little bit. But one of the insights that, as I was reading through your really thorough notes, was this awareness of relationship and rootedness and connectedness. So faith is all about relationship with God, relationship with others. And leadership is all about relationship and influence, how you help people to grow as leaders. And I'm thinking for so many people in ministry today, we have, particularly because of the pandemic, we've seen large swaths of experienced leaders leave ministry and taken with them their wisdom and their legacy and their way of doing things. And so we have a new crop of leaders who are coming into ministry, and that mentoring isn't always provided for in ministerial context. I think we talk about the importance of onboarding staff, but we don't do it. We think that the staff meeting where people show up is where we bring people into the team, but I think it's deeper and wider than that. And I think the best ministry is always at the service of God's people, and service is at the heart of that. And I think leadership is as well. And I think where we can go wrong is because we're just surviving and getting through day to day, that we just want to get the thing done, whatever the thing is, whether it's the program or catch up sacraments or RCIA, getting them all off the ground. We don't have the time to slow down and breathe and to think about our own leadership and how it impacts others. And that's something that I would say to those that are listening is take some time to find those people in your life that are wisdom figures, and don't just ask them how they run their program and, how they set their calendar up. Those are important for sure. But, what kind of leadership has been most impactful in this community? What kind of ministry moments have inspired them to stay not 5 or 10 years, but 20 years, and tap into those pieces as a new leader in ministry, or a seasoned leader, because that's what will keep you going when the program is ready to just crush you with the weight of all the demands.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Um, Gosh, what are, in addition to that, asking those kinds of questions and finding those things out, are there things that we can do for personal development that help us to grow as leaders?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can do for ourselves, but I also think that there are things that we can allow others to do for us. And that's difficult, I think, in ministry,
Yeah.
right? We're great at taking care of everybody else, but we're not great at taking care of ourselves. And I realized, just from my own experience, because I have to make decisions all the time, and that in ministry, you're making constant decisions, that a question that was not helpful for me is, let me know if I can do anything for you. Because it forces you to think about, again, a response and a solution. And I think a far better response to that is, you know me well, and you want to help me, and I don't know how to do this myself. So I want you to pray about that, think about it, and help me with that. Because my grandmother, she was just really robust, Irish, round. We used to call her Nanny, and she had this great expression. She put her hand in front of her face like this, and she'd say, "You can't read a book when it's this close to your face." So I think stepping back sometimes can be really helpful, and having other people reflect what we need. I'll give you a really practical example of that. One of my tells when I am really tired and I'm very, very close to being on the edge of a breakdown, of like, I can't do this, all of that is a pattern of when I get negative. So I can get very critical. And when I get that way, that is a sign to myself that I am now on the edge of running low in terms of my soul tank being on empty. And so just watching for those warning signs, and my team reflecting back, hey, you're normally like the idea person and the positive person. What's really going on? And really not letting me off the hook and saying, oh no, things are fine, it's just been a tough week. No, let's talk about that, Julianne, because you seem like something is going on. I think that's what we can do for each other in ministry that we forget about. And I think when you're in a parish, it can feel like you are the only person, and that you have to do your thing, and that you're not connected to a team. And I think that is one of the hardest things about being in parish ministry, particularly, is because you often wear many hats, feeling like it's all on you and having nowhere to go with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Julianne, I've felt that has become easier for me as I have aged with experience.
Love how you said that, by the way, Sarah.
When I began in ministry, and as I look back in my early years in ministry, I was not able to receive that. And I think that there were people in my life that were trying to help me to understand certain things, but I was not willing to receive that. And so as I look at those who are just getting started in ministry on various teams with whom I work, how do we build those kinds of relationships that are open to having those kinds of conversations of accountability and realization, self-actualization, self-realization, and I don't want to just use the word calling out, because I think that could be too negative, but it can be used in a really powerful and positive way. How can I help younger generations in our ministries learn and grow in that? Because I know I wasn't ready. But I do think that what you are saying is needed. I know I am now ready. Is there a way to help younger generations to become ready sooner? or more
That's a
of
great insight.
Yeah.
And so what I appreciate about your story is your own self-awareness of, I was not ready then. And through wisdom and age and time and experience and suffering, like ministry comes with a lot of personal suffering, because it is so personal, that you have learned that you're ready and you've stepped into that. I think if I was to sit with my younger self, there's a couple of things I would say, which is you're never ever fully ready for ministry, and you're never ever fully prepared, no matter how many degrees or qualifications or what you have or you don't have. This is not a human work. It's a cooperation with God, and I really truly do believe that God will give you what you need if you, like Sarah, you used that word receive, and Christy, you've used that too. If you're open to receive what he has for you, and that might be the wisdom of somebody in a neighboring parish, if it isn't your own. It might be a parishioner who's really inspiring for you. It might not necessarily be the leader that you're with in your formal ministerial role, but it might be somebody around you. So I think that that self-awareness is really key. I think also knowing that you can never be fully ready. It's like having a baby. I think like you're never ready until the baby's in your arms and you're like, okay, I'm figuring this out. Ministry, I think that's where the creativity can come in. Ministry allows you to figure out things organically. And I think if you can surround yourself with healthy, positive role models who can help you grow in the best sense of the word, I think you can find a way to have longevity in ministry, because the average person burns out, depending on the studies you read, between 18 months and 3 years. And that's shocking to me. The other thing I would say to a lot of young people, we go into ministry because we have this huge desire to want to impact people's lives and serve God and do something beautiful for Jesus. Wherever you're at with that, it often comes with the crushing understanding that this is very human work and that you're going to see the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. And I've met a lot of young people who've had this kind of Pollyanna-ish attitude on the church is this utopia, nobody does anything wrong, we're all incredibly virtuous people, and there's never conflict in the office. And it can be very upsetting for them when they come up against situations that are really awful, to recognize that the church it's the kingdom of God, yes, but it's a workplace like other workplaces. And it doesn't absolve us of holding people accountable, of having difficult conversations, and you're going to see it all. So I think, that question, Sarah, is so interesting to ask from the perspective of like, here I am now, and here's what I wish I knew. I mean, hindsight is 2020, but I just hope that for young people listening today, that they recognize that the best people to go to in ministry are the ones who've been in it for a while and have stuck it out and are still joyful, positive, and like, I get up every day. This is amazing. Find those people. Find those people.
You're one of those people for me, Julianne. I love when we meet in person at various conferences. Your joy exudes and it fills me. So I look forward to the next time I'm in person with you at a conference and can give you a great big hug. Your joy is definitely coming across in the video and in our podcast today. So you are definitely one of those people for me. So thank you.
I feel the same way, Sarah.
Oh,
Big love.
I feel the same
Big
about
hug.
Yeah.
You too, Christy.
Hey,
Yeah,
whatever.
Christy's also one of those people for me. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you both. Actually, that was a story about my interview process for the job now, that somebody was like, you're very effusive and I guess joyful, but can you tone it down at times and really sit with people in difficult times? Because I think there's that too. I think, can you slow down and allow for space? But the thing I was thinking about too, Julianne, when you were saying like the Pollyanna, it just was a kind of an epiphany right here, is I think we also think that we ourselves are going to somehow release all of the all of the downside of humanity as when we come into ministry. So like, I think, I think two things for myself. One is I wanted to do it perfectly because it was for the people of God and it was for God. And so I put tremendous pressure on myself to be doing everything excellently all of the time. And I didn't allow for myself to be like, I almost wouldn't accept it that I could be tired or get worn out or, feel sad or irritable also. So I think there's that for young people. And the other is, I sometimes think leading by example. So giving the space to the other person to be vulnerable and say, well, what do you think to the young person? Could you give me any feedback? And showing them how to receive feedback by receiving feedback in the first place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think this is a really germane point too. We are, as a church, the word vulnerability scares us, and it took me a long time to figure out why. I think for lay people, it's something we talk about. We use terms like transparency and vulnerability and things like that. But I recognize from working with our priests, in fact, that the word vulnerable has been stripped of some of its meaning because we talk a lot about protecting vulnerable people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was recognizing when I was going out and I was doing some of the larger big conferences for priest gatherings or diocesan gatherings that my language, I had to be very attentive to the reality that some of our priests have been formed with an understanding that vulnerability refers to keeping people safe. And then their head goes to all the awful things, right? And so this is, to me, is a very real conversation. Vulnerability has become stripped for some of our pastors of what it should be for us as human beings connecting with each other and safeguarding people. It's beyond that, it's deeper than that. And so I've been talking a lot about authenticity with our pastors, and they're like, I can get my head around that, right? But I also think that vulnerability isn't always rewarded when you work in
Oh,
ministry.
exactly.
And this is a hard thing to say. I had a pastor who said, Julianne, you're talking to me about, you know, my preaching, for example. I want to be authentically connected to my people, but I'm afraid that if I disclose too much personal information, that that they're going to look at me differently. So I think we have to get behind that. Good leaders are vulnerable leaders because they recognize that it builds community, it builds a connectivity, it holds space for the dignity of the other to say, I'm not perfect too. And God is working in the midst of that. Somehow we've given, particularly our young ministers, an understanding that perfection, like you said, Christy, that is the highest value. And then we forget things like Jesus said to us, like, it is in your weakness you're perfected. And so I feel like weakness and like we're working together, I feel like that can sometimes be punished actually, rather
Yeah.
than rewarded and saying, here's a beautiful, messy work in progress. Like I remember someone was crying in my office and like, I'm just such a mess. I made such a big mistake. And I was like, this is what conversion looks like from the inside out. It's not this cut and dry process. It's messy, and we are often not okay with mess as a people and as a church.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's really where we're getting it wrong. Like you said, I think some of my hardest lessons have been the times whenever I had to realize, like, I'm not going to be perfect. I do want to strive to get it right with people, but that's a learning process, and nobody steps into anything, immediately amazing. I'll just throw in a little aside. I'm trying to learn golf with my husband. I mean, I understand the game. I know what you're supposed to do. I have had professional lessons by a PGA, tour person. And yet I bring those clubs out, and sometimes I hit the ball and it's beautiful, and other times it's a complete disaster. And it's terrifying to be beside my husband, who's been playing golf since he was like 12 years old, and he'll say to me, please don't compare yourself to me. Well, I almost can't help myself. But I think ministry could be that same way too. Like sometimes when you're a new leader and you're coming in behind somebody that's been doing this work for 20 or 30 years, and they are that person that's held on to the joy, it's so intimidating to be like, I'm never going to be able to do it like Julianne does, or like Sarah does, or Betty was the person that I came in behind that, I just was like, she's so good at this. And but also I realized early on her manner was different than my manner. So how I'm going to approach it and the things that I'm going to do, they need to be different. I don't know how we can help people understand that and be okay with that, and be okay with, like you said, the messiness. Do you have any?
Yeah, I think it's such a profound insight. We always compare ourselves to others. There's two things that pop into my mind, which is comparison is the thief of peace. And
Right.
I lean into that hard because in the social media driven world, the church has, is now, you can see into any ministry you want. You can see into the best speakers in the world and how they're doing things. And it can make you look at what you're doing in your parish and feel really inadequate. And that is such a mistake, because I think that is where so much goodness from within the life of the church is emerging. It's not on a stage at a massive event. Like, those are great things, but the day-to-day relationship building that's happening, that is where there's beauty and people are coming alive. And I think we forget that small, humble ministry is the mustard seed in the kingdom of God. The other thing I want to talk to you about, Christy, too, you said something earlier, like I had to tone it down. Oh my gosh, if I had $1 for every time someone told me to tone something down, I would be a millionaire in the church. I think there's a time and a place for appropriate conversation and energy and all of that. But I often think part of why we struggle is we think we're not enough and we have to be somebody else. So I received a massive lesson in this. I was speaking at a retreat once, and I was saying, I have tons of energy, and like the retreat was just this very upbeat, high energy retreat. And then you're on a journey when you're on a retreat, so you want to modulate that energy for people. And I remember saying, I wish I could be like, and I talked about the person I wanted to be like, and that person had come into the back of the room during this retreat, and I didn't see them. And afterwards, this person was very, very wise and quite well known, came up to me and said, "Don't ever pray to be like someone else. God has given you an incredible energy, Julianne. Pray for that energy to increase for him. My personality is a little different. I am very mild mannered, and I wish I had the energy. The kingdom is blessed by the
Oh,
serenity I have and the energy you have. And that is what honors God, is who he's created you to be." And I have never forgotten that lesson. I was like,
that's
okay,
fabulous.
yeah, like,
Mhm.
be yourself. God wants your whole self, not some version of yourself that isn't real. He wants your whole heart and all of the messy cracks and places that he's working in your life. And somehow I think our ministers need to hear that, because what we talk about a lot is the glory story of like, oh, my life was like this and Jesus came and now I am,
Mhm.
a new creation, and I've shiplapped my house and everything looks perfect. And
Mhm.
I am not interested in those stories. I call them the glory stories. I'm interested in what happens in the midst of the mess, because that is where God is really working.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the more refreshing pastors I've worked with often talked in his homilies about his conversations with his therapist, and some of the work that he does, and really the
Wow.
findings that he had, not necessarily the conversations he had within that, because that's all confidential, and
Mhm.
that's important, but his what he has come, the fruit that has come from that. And I just thought that was that authenticity that he brought to his homilies really made it just, and he would say it just so matter of factly that it was just, of course he goes to therapy. And of course this is part of who he is. And of course this is normal. And doesn't everybody do this? Isn't this just a normal way of life? And it was just so very refreshing to know that a person in leadership, a person in a place of power in our church, is wrestling with things and has somebody outside of our church proper that is wrestling with these themes and these things, and is really working with it. I just thought that was really phenomenal.
I agree with that. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a lesson too. I work with the bishops, a lot of the bishops, and I would say the same thing. The bishops I've connected most with have been the ones who have said to me, this meeting was really tough, and I
Yeah.
really need to go back and reflect on it, because something inside me has broken open and I am really struggling with whatever it is. And
Yeah.
I have commended those bishops who have been very open with their own struggles around mental health, or like their weight or whatever, we forget that they're human beings
Yep.
too. They're leaders in the church who struggle with the same issues we do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down also that you said comparison is the thief of peace. I wrote that down as I was preparing for Vacation Bible School last week. I was on a Facebook group for this Vacation Bible School theme, and one of my volunteers, I shared this with her, and this group, just all of the great, big displays and everything, and I started, getting antsy, like, oh my gosh, we're never going to be able to do all of this and what we're supposed to do and what we should be doing, and it has to, and the musts and the I'm supposed to. And one of my amazing volunteers, she's a school teacher, Jennifer, she looked at me, she's like, Sarah, get off of that damn Facebook page. I'm going to start squirting you like a cat if you keep talking to me about that Facebook page. She's like, the kids don't care. They just want to come
and they don't
and have a fun time, and we're going to do the things. They don't care. I'm like, okay. But we do. We compare, and it went off beautifully. They loved this space. It was just gorgeous. It was just a lot of fun. And no, it wasn't perfect. And things fell off of the walls, and balloons popped, and lights went out, and it was awful in so many ways. But it was so perfectly imperfect. It was perfect.
I love that.
But she, but I was starting to, that's where the anxiety comes up, is when those comparisons come up. And, I'm just starting to notice where is like when I'm starting to feel that tightness in the chest and that worry and that anxiety, and, when my triggers start to show, where is that deeper rootedness? What is it that's starting to concern me? And I think part of it is that comparison. And I think on the outside, in my strength, I don't compare myself to other people. I don't really care about that stuff. Who cares about those people? But really deep down, there is that insecurity of not doing the right thing, of not meeting expectations, and doing the wrong thing, And I think too, there was, when I was working at the Archdiocese, I kept saying to my supervisor, I'm just waiting for the switch to flip, like, to know what I'm supposed to be doing here. I'm just waiting. Like, I know this work, but I'm just waiting to understand how I'm supposed to be doing it. So I'm just waiting for the light switch to turn on for me to be able to do this job. Like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I just, for some reason, I'm not getting it. And I felt like I just never got it there. So I just, and maybe there was some comparison going on there too, that I just,
or it could have been the culture.
Well, yeah. I mean, that could be too. I mean, I don't know. There's so many different things that kind of like, there's a whole lot. There's just a whole lot. I won't go into any kind of blame there. I just kept waiting for a switch to flip, and to be able to know. And like, I would know exactly what's going on. But you keep talking.
Does that ever happen? Does that happen? I mean, I still feel like and maybe I'm too new in ministry still, but I just feel like there's plenty of times whenever I'm like, I don't know if this is what anyone was expecting. And I don't know necessarily if this is part of the plan, but I'm just going to move forward. But
I think that's the comfort of this conversation, is hearing that we're not prepared, or there's never a fully ready for what we're doing.
Yeah.
I always thought that we should be fully ready.
Yeah. This is such an interesting conversation. I was thinking about this as you both were speaking, and particularly hearing, Sarah, like how things didn't quite click, and was it me, was it them? And those are the most awkward moments in ministry, when you're second guessing yourself, you're second guessing actually your call to the ministry. What I realized, as you look at scripture, for example, you hear every person that is ever called always gives up their limitation to God. So here's what I mean by that. So when Moses was called, he literally says in the Bible, I'm not a speaker, Lord. And you hear Jeremiah say, I'm too young. And you hear Sarah say, I'm too old for this. And when God calls us, what we always give him back is our limitations And we talk about our ability. I can't do this. I'm questioning myself. And what God says to us is just give me your yes, right? And I think that's why, we have the Blessed Mother, and she says yes. But even she says to, in the scriptures, yeah, but how can it be since I have not laid with a man, right? So again, she's looking at that piece, but she gives her whole heart. And I think for us sometimes in ministry, we have to realize that God doesn't always bless our ability, but our availability to Him.
Oof.
Right? Because I think we cannot do this all on our own. Ministry was never set up that way. And when it becomes about us, then we're on very dangerous territory. But if we give Him our availability to something like, God, I can't do this, but you can. I think that's the most powerful prayer that I personally pray. And it's 10 words. And it's, I can't. And you can insert whatever you can, whatever the issue is. Like, I can't face this Bible study. I can't do this, whatever it is. I can't, but you can. Jesus, show me the way.
Ugh.
And that is the surrender and giving up the control in that situation and recognizing, God, you know how to do this and you know what you want from this situation. I'm here. I'm ready to do what you want me to do. Just I'm yearning to hear your voice. Help me move forward. And so I think, as I'm listening, Sarah, I think too that component can be very powerful for people to realize sometimes it isn't you, sometimes it is them. So I want to talk about the culture a little bit because I think this is so important. All of our offices, all of our ministerial environments are mini culture, they're mini ecosystems of unconscious attitudes, practices, and traditions that we step into. What do I mean by that? When you work at a parish, it's like you inherit these norms from 20, 30 years ago. Oh, when Father was here. Now, Father might not have been here for 20 years, but his picture is still on the wall and somebody remembers him. And that's what we've done. And the picnic is always the way because he started it. And it's the same with diocesan offices. I often define culture is what is celebrated and what is tolerated.
Yes.
Right. And so you're both laughing. I hope people watch this because your facial expressions are hysterical. Because this is the reality we live with that we never talk about. And we have to talk about what people are feeling and what they're bumping up. Because then, Sarah, you can recognize that when you're in a situation like that and it just never fit, the culture and you were just not at a place where you could grow and where you could be loved and where you could be empowered. And for whatever reason, you were called to something else. And I think we think we fail in that, right? Rather than recognizing, no, the culture and I just that weren't the right fit. And that's okay. And, that's why change and movement always have to be part of leadership, because once you are stagnant, well, stagnant bodies die. And as a church, we have to really take that seriously.
Okay, so I think you just made Sarah cry. I know that you made me cry, Julianne. I mean, you hit it so completely on the head. The prayer that you said, for me, I didn't know it, but honestly, those are the times whenever I've had the most clarity in ministry, whenever I've said, Lord, I can't do this. I don't know how, but show me the way. Yeah. It has been incredible. And what we tolerate and what we celebrate that is who we are as a culture. And I'm going to say that too, that I've noticed I was at a place for a time and it worked. I mean, we still had that whole, when Father was here and, that guy had retired 15 years ago. So Lord knows how long ago it was that he was here, but those kind of things that carry through, and culture changes, I think, slowly, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it's calling it out, acknowledging it, and working together to come up with a new way that might happen. Sarah, you want to say?
Thank you, Julianne. Really appreciate your words. I think the prayer is so important and really does hit home right now, because God is calling me into a place that I don't necessarily feel I have the ability, but I do feel that I've been called into the availability. Right. So in our previous podcast, I talked about being called into family ministry. Okay, I don't have children, so I don't know the first thing about parent ministry, right? Like I have no experience in that. None. I mean, my niece is 20 some years old, 27, 28 years old. She's never lived very close. It's not like I helped raise her. I have no experience raising children. So like there's no parenting. Speaking of parenting, we'll talk about Julianne's book in a minute. The Catholic Parent Survival Guide, because this is going to be my go-to book when I talk to parents about parenting. But I don't have that. So I think, when you talk about, like, my thought was, well, you said Moses couldn't speak, but he brought in, who did he bring in? I just lost the name.
Aaron, his brother.
Aaron, sorry. Aaron spoke for him. So like, sorry, I'm like, I don't even know the name. So like, okay, I'm not the parent, but I have parents around me at the office who are really good parents, that when parent things, they can speak as parents. So it's not like I have to be the parent.
No, you don't have to have or be at all.
Right? I can't, but you can.
Yes.
Show me the way, right? Like that is it's I don't have to be all things to all people. And that is an important reminder. And Julianne, your book, The Catholic Parent Survival Guide, is really brilliant. I absolutely love the questions that are asked. This book, everybody, it's straight answers to your kids' toughest questions. And there are questions in here from kiddos, 10 and 12 years old, teenagers, 16, 17 years old. And you don't shy away from any of the questions. I mean, you don't shy away from any of the questions.
No, they don't.
No.
Talking about, same-sex attraction and Mariana, age 8, how's a baby made?
Yep.
I mean, we get into it. But then there's,
wait. Does it say something about a cabbage patch in there?
Or the stork.
The stork.
That's a big one.
We get into what does the phrase real presence of Christ in the Eucharist mean, right?
Yeah.
Like these are real good. It's a question and answer. And Julianne, I read the answers in your voice.
Oh,
like,
that's hysterical.
Voice answering these questions. And I love it. And they're some really practical answers. And I'm not necessarily a book reader. I'm a little ADD. And I'm dyslexic. So I like the fact that I can go in and I can read this short question and answer and then move on. I can take a look at this when somebody asks a question and I can go in and I can read it and that's it. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really great book from Loyola Press. Again, that's the Catholic Parent Survival Guide. Brand spanking new.
It's brand spanking new. Yeah, it just came out. Can I tell you just a little bit that how this relates to our previous conversation? And Sarah, I want to say something to you too. I want you to hear. Even in your conversation just a few minutes ago, you were like, and I don't have, and I didn't, and you gave all the limitations of why you should not be in this ministry, right? And like just exactly what we talked about earlier, like if this was like the Acts of the Apostles of Sarah and Christy and Julianne, this would be Sarah mansplaining to Jesus, like all the things of why she shouldn't be in this ministry, right? And Jesus would still say, come on, Sarah, you can do this, right? I have called you out of this. And I think there was something as you were speaking that came to me for you, which is Thomas Merton's prayer of like, my Lord, I do not know the way, but I have the desire to please you. And I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. Your desire to want to do right by those families and shape their experience of faith, man, that pleases God, Sarah, and he will give you everything you need, right? So you need to hear that. And speaking of giving everything you need, in light of my book, the reason I wrote it was because I have, like most of you, I've been in the world of the church for, it feels like 100 years. And as a young mom and a parent, I was struggling to answer my kids' questions because if you're listening as a parent, you will know this. It doesn't matter how many degrees, what theology class you go for, it does not prepare you to answer your children's questions. And I was like, what? And so I said to my husband, regular Wisconsin man, eats the cheese, does all the things. And I said to him, if I have been in the church for my entire life, 20 plus years working, and I have all of this graduate studies, and I feel inadequate as a parent, you have not studied all this stuff. How do you feel? And he said, we're figuring this out as we go along. And so I wanted to parents to know that that is okay. Like there are no experts when it comes to how to navigate the faith life of your children. It's so unique and it's so personal. And yes, we can have better language and frameworks and things, but we have to recognize that we as parents have a huge amount of influence with our children, and that I wanted to tell the stories of the children. So actually, I put the project together with all the questions that kids were asking that they were afraid to ask their parents. And then parents who were like, here's how I answered the question. Don't answer it like this. It's terrible. I wanted the failure and the mistake, and also the like, here's how I did answer the question. And I was surprised, but they loved it. Put those two things together. Because I think that parents don't recognize their own leadership as people of faith. Their kids are watching every single day, every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the things that oh gosh, we've totally blown past time, but this is so good. This is such a great conversation. We're doing a lot of family ministry now in our parish, and we have such great, vibrant families, and we're doing a lot of stuff in the homes. And as I'm talking to parents, I say it's kind of like a hybrid ministry. We do a lot in the home, and you're going to be talking to your kids about faith. Now, I'm not just saying, here, go teach your kids about this topic, have at it. We're going to do this together, and I'm going to give you all the tools and resources that you need. And you're not supposed to have all the answers. And if you have a question that you don't know the answer to, say, you know what, we're going to learn this one together. And we're going to talk to Miss Sarah, and let's write her an email, or, let's ask her at the next family night, and let's learn this. And they should know that this is a lifelong learning process.
Yes.
They should know that your faith is not perfect. They should know that you still have questions, and there are some things that you are still uncertain on, but you keep showing up. You keep coming, you're present on Sundays, even when you're uncertain about some things, even if you don't know everything about everything that there is about the Catholic Church. Just keep showing up and asking questions. And I love it when our kiddos ask questions. And that's
the heart of it.
Sometimes.
Oh, they're totally off the wall. How tall is Jesus? Like all the questions. I love what you just said, Sarah. It's about being present. It's about being consistent. It's about vulnerability. We talked about that earlier. It's about saying, I don't have this figured out, but on my worst days, and we've all gone through some tough times, and I've talked to my kids about some of those tough times. Like, when your dad and I, when we lost our child, one of our children, I remember the day after the funeral, I was in this fog and saying, the only thing that was holding me together was my faith, was our home, and not being afraid to say to our kids, we experienced this loss, and our family, we still, we talk about that, but just to give that witness back to our kids, to say, you're going to go through tough times in life. Faith is the only choice that comes with no regrets. Having faith is a choice that comes with no regrets. And how often can you say that about anything in life? Not very much. The other thing I would say, Sarah, and your language is so deeply personal, is to remind leaders that we're not passing on the faith, or parents, we're not passing on the faith, passing on a living relationship, a living dynamic. It's not a manual that you give, like you said, Sarah. It's about coming together and doing life together, because faith is about relationship, which is we can only go as far as people trust us.
Absolutely. All right, any final closing thoughts, Christy? We really do need to
I know,
move along on
there's so many. This conversation could go on for days. And Julianne, thank you so much. Your wisdom, your insights, your gift to us has been incredible. I just have loved every minute of it. But we're going to end with the question we always ask, which is, do you wish that there was something that you knew when you started out in ministry? If there was something that you could tell your young self starting out, what would that be?
Trust in God and trust yourself. God is calling you for a reason. You've instincts, and he will send the right people to guide you on the way. I don't think we trust ourselves enough. I think the culture teaches us not to trust ourselves. I think as women in the church, we often hear that we shouldn't trust our instincts. Unfortunately, trust your instincts, and trust that if God calls you to this, he will bless you at every stage.
It's beautiful.
Thank you,
Mm.
Julian. Really,
Oh,
really.
you're so
appreciate you
welcome.
being
God
here,
bless
everybody.
you.
This is the Catholic Parent Survival Guide from Loyola Press, and we are here with Julianne Stanz. I can't, but you can, Jesus. Show me the way. That is our prayer today. And thank you all for joining us as you go on your way. We'll see you the next time.
Peace.
All right.
God bless.
Thank you for joining today's podcast. Please click the like and subscribe. And if you find this important to the conversations you're having in your local ministry, please share and join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast.